Welcome to the bizval podcast. At bizval, we are passionate about empowering entrepreneurs the world over to understand and unlock the value in their business. We work with advisors and entrepreneurs to demystify the value creation process when building a business. At bizval, we know how tough it is to grow and run a business, which is exactly why we've made valuations simple to understand, accurate, and affordable. Our unique blend of tech and touch ensures that you always receive the best service, authentic human engagement, and data-led insights to ensure that you build a business that provides you with freedom and choice. In the bizval podcast, we showcase stories of real entrepreneurs and advisors, sharing lessons and inspiration from their journeys to make your journey just that little bit easier. Today, I'm really thrilled to be joined by Eduan Steynberg. He's a chartered accountant by training and profession, ex-wine industry executive, and he's now, a business advisory board facilitator and the owner of the alternative board in the Western Cape. So, Eduan, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, hi Graham. Good to be here and looking forward to the chat.
Fantastic. Well, look, you've got a really interesting journey, and we're going to unpack that a little bit. So, from your, growing up and going to school at Grey College in Bloemfontein, or my wife's from there, so should I say the City of Roses? She definitely bears testament to that. You're studying as a chartered accountant, a bit about your learnings and journey in the wine industry. And I think specifically, we want to kind of unpack a little bit about the work you're doing, with the alternative board. So, it's a conversation. So let's dive into sort of, the beginning story for our international listeners. Bloemfontein it's a little town in the middle of nowhere, and right in the center of South Africa. You grew up there. You went to Grey College, and Grey College is one of those schools that's got for rugby followers, it's got a great heritage there, but it's got a reputation for discipline, performance, a very strong culture. So let's go back to those days, Eduan, and maybe share a little bit about your experience growing up and going to school in Bloemfontein and how that shaped you.
Graham, thanks for bringing that up. Normally, we have to tell people that we've been to Grey College, and it's always a joke. So thanks for sparing me that. No, look, if I think back about my days at Grey, it's a place that's rich in culture and tradition. They've got a value system that's absolutely unwavering, and the will to succeed and the determination to be the best you can be. All those things are really really important. But I also find that things that carried me through in life were the words like accountability, discipline, and then respect. It all sort of became part of our DNA, and I would be forever grateful for that opportunity. It was really a special time in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I'll for those listeners who don't know, there's actually two Greys in South Africa. There's the Grey College in Bloemfontein, and obviously there's Grey High. I grew up in Quebec or Port Elizabeth, in the Eastern Cape, and that's obviously Grey High, and yeah, that's the alma mater of Siya Kolisi, the Springbok rugby captain. So there was also quite an intense rivalry between the two Greys. There was a loose affiliation, but I'm sure you were part of some of those experiences as well.
Yes, so we actually did the train trip from Bloemfontein to Quebec, and once a year we went down, and the next year they came up, and it's a tradition that's still going. I've been out of the school for 40 years, but it's still happening every year.
100%. And just a little bit, I mean, like Bloemfontein, as I say, it's a city, but it's a small town. Would you say growing up in an environment like that, it's maybe not kind of the Johannesburg or the Chicago or the London of the world? I mean, how did that form, or kind of how did that influence your perspective or your worldview growing up in a town like that?
Look, I think the fact is that you're still in a world-class organization, and whether it's a big town or a small town, it doesn't matter. What we learned to sort of respect is the traditions that's been there, the changes that the institution has gone through. But then living in a town where you still have friends and family and going out, it's an easy environment. There's not a lot of stuff that sort of gets you into the wrong things. Everybody knows what you're up to, and it's like a family environment. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I guess it's that sort of small town, and if you're in the US, like sort of small town America, it's a very wholesome environment to grow up. You're not sitting in traffic, and you don't have a lot of those distractions. So you spend a lot of time, as you say, with friends and building relationships and learning the importance of that stuff.
Yeah, and so I grew up on a farm in a even smaller town, about 100 kilometers away. So to me, it was the big city, so to speak. So it was getting to bigger places.
Yeah, my father-in-law went to Brebno, which was the other sort of boys' school in Bloemfontein, and he grew up in a farm halfway between Kimberley and Bloemfontein. So I know that part of the world very well. So yeah, really excited to chat further. So let's, you grew up in Bloemfontein, you went to Grey, you're now going to take on the world, and you decided to go and study chartered accounting. So what led you from choosing to pursue a career as a future Springbok rugby player, given the school heritage, to study accounting? What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, funny thing is, I was actually a tennis player, and I was actually considering a career in tennis at the time, which wasn't nearly as competitive and as well organized as it is today. But I guess I was always a little bit good with numbers. And at the time, I'm not 100% sure what it's like now, but at the time, the pass rates for CAs were really low. It was like 30% of people that enrolled, which created a little bit of demand in the market, but also great opportunities. My mother sort of indicated to me, this is something that will stand you in good stead, or will give you a good platform for business later on in your life, and it certainly has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about tennis, I think one of South Africa's most famous female tennis players, Amanda Kutzer, grew up in was it Hoopstad, which is not too far from Bloemfontein. So that might have been an option.
Small world. I actually went to my matric farewell with her sister.
Oh, wow.
So now we played together quite a lot, and she was an amazing tennis player. Really small, but heart of a lion.
Fantastic. Well, we learned something interesting. Sometimes you go into these podcasts and these things pop up. That wasn't pre-scripted or pre-prepared. So I'm sure there's some stories to tell there. So, so let's move on from there. So you've studied as a chartered accountant. Your reason going into that, and then along the way, you got involved in the wine industry, so from going from sport to numbers, maybe the numbers drove you to think about something different. But let's talk a little bit about your move into the wine industry. And that's a very interesting environment, very operational environment. Firstly, why did you move into that industry? And then what did this teach you? Obviously, it was a part of your career that was quite foundational. Let's go a little bit deeper into that, Eduan.
So, following the studies, I actually spent quite a bit of time in corporate South Africa. But I always had this sort of dream to get into my own business. And at the time, there was this public wine business in Stellenbosch that fell into a bit of financial difficulty. And I looked at it and I just saw the opportunity. For me, it was like, just finding an opportunity to do something for myself. And prove my own worth and see what I've learned and whether I can apply that. So it's really been like an opportunity that fell into my lap.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about that. So, you went into this business. Was a bit of a turnaround story, I guess. What are some of the big lessons that you learned over those times for our listeners? So it's one thing starting a business, it's another thing coming to a business that's struggling and needs to be fixed. Okay, so maybe you can share some of those stories and some of the key lessons out of that.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's if we have 6 hours, I can keep you busy for that. But it's certainly been a great experience. First of all, you ask why you go into the industry, and you get in there, and it's you get to taste wine at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's considered work. So it's really a nice industry to be in as well. But coming back to your question. Maybe just a few things, if I can expand on that. The first one was the trust relationship I had with the independent chairman. It was a retired individual with extremely good business experience. In fact, he didn't know anything about the wine industry, neither did I. So we both came into this, not knowing what has happened for all the years before us, and just having somebody to bounce ideas off, to soundboard was amazing. One of I think the turning points came when we realized that we were selling profit to retailers and not wine. People get excited about the quality and the sticker and the this and the that and the other thing, and you're competing with more than 500 other wineries in South Africa. So we changed the conversation with the retailer, and it just created a different environment. We hear, what can we do for you, as opposed to please list us, please sell our wine, and that was a great lesson. When I joined, obviously there was a lot of staff in there that has been there for years and years, and I call them in Afrikaans the ou hout. They certainly were entrenched in the way of doing things and so on. So we brought in a few new people, but we kept some of those old ones, and the blend between the two was amazing, because it sort of allowed us to do controlled innovation. And do controlled new initiatives. So we called them a little bit of our handbrakes, and it kept us from going too far out of what has historically been the way to do things. And then I would say the relationship we had to build with our bankers and our funders, and to get them to fully understand the industry. Because bankers are there to borrow you money and to make a good return and make sure they have no risk. But until we got them to understand, we were able to structure the funding to sort of work into this extremely capital intensive industry, and where the inventory and cash flow cycles are quite complex. So those are some of the key things, I would say.
No, I mean, there's some fascinating stuff in it. The old sort of joke goes, how do you become a millionaire out of being a wine farmer? You start as a billionaire. but I think just to touch on a few things there, I think there's a few key lessons. One is that, in a way, you're sort of not knowing the industry, but having a financial background and almost being a little bit naive around that, kind of probably brought a lot of fresh ideas. You were able to look at it objectively, as opposed to sometimes wine farming, and that can be quite artisanal. It's all about the product, as you say, the quality of the wine. At the end of the day, you're running a business here. Understanding who your market is. Is it somebody sitting in a restaurant sipping that wine, or is it a retailer who's buying from you? So all those kind of things, and having that independent view. But yet, the other thing which struck me as you were talking is that also having the old guard, so to speak, or the ohot in Afrikaans, that kind of were able to instill the wisdom around what worked. But it seems as though there was a willingness for them to accept that they needed some new ideas. Maybe the fact that they were struggling. You were willing to experiment, and entrepreneurship and business building and fixing never stands still. So I think there's some great lessons and insights from that. And I'm sure as we go into the next part of your story, probably also gave you some foundational thinking around the role of the alternate board. The last thing I want to touch on, you talked about capital structure and that, but making wine is not an instant process, so it's capital intensive. It requires funding. Even growing of grapes, it's a process, right? You plant the vineyards, you wait a number of years before the vines are mature. It's plant for today, harvest years later, mature the wines. It could be 5 to 7 years before you producing or selling. What did that teach you? And obviously there's a long-term mindset in that. And where do you think businesses get it wrong when it comes to thinking over a longer time horizon rather than just how do we turn a quick profit?
So what we did there, Graham, is we found a balance between own production and third-party procurement. We decided quite early on that we needed to have shorter inventory cycles, and we used our own production capacity to only produce the top quality wines in our own cellar. And then we sourced the more commercial wines from people who had surplus wine in the industry. And we make great wine in South Africa. Nobody's there to make bad wine. So we were able to source really good quality wine at affordable prices, and therefore balance the business that way, so that it wasn't just dependent on that capital intensive side of the industry.
Yeah, so that diversification was key, and also I guess playing to recognizing what your strengths were and then relying on other people who were better at certain things, just buying in grapes rather than having to have your own vineyards and run the risk of one bad harvest ruining the business. So a lot of learnings, I guess, in that too.
Yep. That was really good.
Yeah. So you spent a big chunk of your business there, and then, I'm going to jump to kind of the next chapter, and there was an inflection point where you kind of moved out of that role into, running peer advisory boards. And I guess, this is the sort of start of the alternative board journey. Talk us through that. What kind of was that inflection point where you say, okay, cool, I want to move on and do something else? And why moving into the sort of peer advisory space as opposed to running your own business, which was something you always wanted to do, right?
So just to complete the wine story, we actually in the end sold out to a listed French company, which gave me the opportunity to start something afresh. And I did what a friend of mine told me, is go sit on a rock and have 6 beers, and after the 6th beer you the wisdom will come to you. But basically what happened is, I formulated 5 key things that, that I thought was important for a next step. The first was that I've got this wealth of experience, I've got experience that I could share with other people, and the willingness to do that. I'm the curious type of guy, going into the wine industry without knowing anything about it. I always like to learn new things. So I wanted to still be exposed to different businesses, different industries. I definitely wanted to work for myself, having seen the impact of corporate again on at the end of that phase. I wanted to do something that didn't really feel like work. And then I sort of clearly indicated I didn't want a retirement age. I want to be able to do it for as long as I can, and I want to be able to do it anywhere in the world. So now you've got this list, and you start looking, and all of a sudden I bump into somebody who tells me about the alternative board, go through the investigation, and we tick all 5 boxes. So it's not often that happens. So I just thought it was like, this is supposed to be the thing. So I jumped into it.
I love that. I think in that, you just spoke about, you didn't have a laundry list of like, this is what I want in a job, but you had some very clear principles in terms of what aligned with your value system and what you want to do. And, I love some of those, like, we conditioned to think, you work until 60 and then save up and retire. But I mean, this notion of, it's actually a philosophy I have, is this notion of having a retirement age already constrains your thinking. So I love some of those. And then you've got this sort of, let's call it North Star of where you want to go. And the other thing I want to just touch on is, I love your humility. If you were one of these LinkedIn celebrities, you would have the first line of your profile will be 1x exited founder and all of those things. So there's none of that. You've introspected. You've created value. You've now thought about what's next. Let's talk about the alternative board a little bit. What is it exactly? So for somebody who's never heard about it, what is it?
Yeah, it's they always say it's difficult to tell people in a few lines, but let me try. The alternative board is a franchised system. It operates in 26 countries around the world. It's been going for more than 30 years. It's founded in the US. But essentially what we do is we help business owners and their teams realize their vision of success. And that ties into that passion of giving back and making a difference. And the way we do that is we have really strong and good industry-leading business planning tools that's an online system that we use. And from using that system, we help the business owner develop a robust business plan. But as you know, business plans are really good, but they end up in drawers or puts it lying on the shelf and so on. So what we become the accountability partner of the business owner, and we meet monthly with them, and we call it our one-on-one accountability session. And here we sort of try and meet the business owner where they're at the stage, understand what's driving them, what's important to them, but then focus on the execution and the implementation of that plan. And quite typically, that's where people get stuck. Something is, you're not moving forward on something that you want to implement. And that's where the last sort of phase comes in of what we offer, and that's these peer advisory boards. And we bring these people that we work with together in the form of a board, and we call it the alternative board, and that's where the name comes from. And there you get the opportunity to present a challenge or an opportunity or something that you want some external advice on, or just clarity or verification of your thinking. And in that room, people actually provide you with what we call real life advice. It's not from a textbook. It's not a fancy consulting firm that comes in and charges you a lot of money and I'm going to move you from point A to point B. What we do is we work with the business owner, develop that plan, continuously update that plan, and then focus on the execution, take it to the board. And I must be honest with you, I've been doing this for 6 years now, and in the last 6 years, I probably learned more about business than any 30 years before that, and I thought, I was okay.
Exactly, yeah. And I suppose you're working with real founders who are going through the grind every day. I mean, one of the things is, and I'm going to dive into a little bit. And one of the questions I've got is, how's this different? People listening in might think, how's this different to business coaching or, like operating model kind of providers? There's a lot of those. I'll get to that in a second. But I think the other thing is, it's real owners, and entrepreneurship can be lonely, can be very isolating. And I suppose part of this alternative board is one, it's addressing that sort of like, okay, I've got somebody in my corner, I've got a team who supports me. But beyond that, just let's call it that emotional support, like why does this actually matter commercially for a business owner? It's cool to say, okay, cool, I've got a team behind me, but why does it matter having this behind you commercially?
Yeah, Graham, it's a good question, if I think about it, I would say the first thing is that we all have blind spots. And we don't realize that, especially in our South African environment, we macho men, we need to know it all. We need to be the people that people turn to, find the solutions to all the problems. But we're not perfect. So that's the first thing, is that you need to be able to address that. The second thing is, why reinvent the wheel? The the lessons that entrepreneurs learn over years, and you're sitting with people in the room, each 20 to 30 years in their own businesses, there are 8 or 10 of them around the room. Just imagine the amount of experience that's in there. And I haven't seen one challenge or one opportunity that hasn't been something that some other member has gone through before. So, you know, and it's not just avoiding mistakes, but it's also capitalizing on the wins that people have. And, you know, it certainly helps a lot with that. And then the last thing is that, you know, business owners, when I meet them, I would say 95% of them are overworked, overstressed. And in a way, they actually don't even enjoy what they're doing anymore. And through this process of engaging with other people and making short-term wins, we help them fall in love with their businesses again, you know, and that is the difference we're making. You know, you can see the impact, and instead of working 12 hours a day, you're working 7 hours a day. Instead of, it's just fantastic.
I love that. And, you know, kind of leading into the next question, I mean, I think you've elaborated a little bit on it. How is this different to a business coach? There's somebody listening in outside, okay, so it might say, you know, a business coach does that or a mentor does that. How is that different? And we're not knocking the role that coaches in that play. They've got a very visible part, but can you just kind of articulate clearly where this differs?
So I would say the first thing is that we've got tools and processes that are tried and tested. You know, it's if you go to New Zealand, you go to India, you go to Spain, doesn't matter. What we use is exactly the same, and it works. You know, and I've been doing it for 6 years, and you know, I can see why it has been so successful around the world. The second thing is that we are people kind of business. So it's not just you and the coach; it's you and this other group of entrepreneurs, and not only the ones that you engage with in your board, but also we create events for them to meet each other on a wider front. And then on our platform, we also have what we call Tab Connect, which is like a mini LinkedIn, but only for people who are directly involved with Tab. And that way we connect people around the world. So if you're an IT programmer and you want to open a business in Ireland, we can connect you with the right people to go and do that. Although that's not our primarily objective, but you know, it does give you this additional scope and exposure to other things. And finally, it's just this peer accountability, you know, where the typical business owner would go, you know, okay, I'm busy, I couldn't get to that, I'll get to it next week. Whereas corporate, you know, there's a board, there's a management system, and you know, you get monitored all along. So even though we don't force people to do things, but we tend to just help them stay on track with the plans that they have. So, you know, our recipe creates implementation and forward motion.
100%. Yeah, I love that. You know, so it's more than just a personal accountability coach. It's recognizing that you're operating as part of an ecosystem, but it's also putting, you know, processes and procedures and all of that together. So it's a real team effort. And I'll use a rugby analogy. You know, it's a little bit like if the business owner is the scrum half, you're almost like the front row and the scrum that pushes the ball forward and then opens up the opportunities for the scrum half, or you know, in a line out, you know, you're kind of the guys who's lifting the jumper to catch the ball, right? So I think it's more than the coach sitting on the side of the field just cheering everyone on, so to speak.
And what's important also, Graham, is that we quite often find that people bring personal topics to the table as well. You know, once you're in that safe space and that confidential environment, you know, and the trust is built amongst the team, we're all human as well. We all have other challenges. It's not just the business that challenges us, and more often than not, it's the personal stuff that avoids you from getting to your business objectives. And we've had amazing topics where people open up and share what's preventing them from being totally effective. Although we're not psychologists, but we could share advice and learnings that we've had in similar situations. And then also we do bring a lot of business experience to the table as well. So it's not just like asking questions. We've got this little bit of a balance between providing a bit of advice as well.
Absolutely. So I've got three more questions, and let's address those, and then we can go into our rapid fire section. But the first one is you're sitting in boardrooms with business owners every month, engaging them. What are the sort of 3 or 4 like key challenges or patterns that when you bring on a new client or a new partner? What are the sort of things that you see repeating across entrepreneurs and business owners?
Number one, poor financial management and cash flow. It's amazing. People don't budget, they don't have plans, they don't know, how they make their money, the margins are not looked after. Inability to sell. Good products, good services, but inability to sell with not great marketing strategies to back that up. Always over-dependence on a small group of customers, maybe a small group of suppliers, and even more so a small group of staff. Finding the right staff as well. And then if you limit me to 4, I would say over-dependence on the owner.
I mean, it's fascinating because we obviously are valuation experts, right? And when we say what makes a business valuable, it's a function of risk and reward. And if you simplify it to its essence is, can that business make cash profits? Can it grow them? And can it do it sustainably without the business owner being the key person? Sustainability means you can't have customer dependence or owner dependence and all of that. So basically what you've played back to me is essentially the business valuation thesis. Now, if you do all of those things, you create a more valuable business, which then gives options to you and your family and all of that. So it's amazing how these sort of common themes keep coming up. And I guess, the measurement of this ultimately, if you've been working with a client, is they should have a more valuable business over time. That's and more freedom for the owner, most importantly, right?
So again, just to tie it up a little bit further in terms of what you were just saying is that, when we have our first engagement with somebody to see whether we can work together, whether we can add value, whether they will get value, whether they can add value to our ecosystem, one of the first questions we ask is, what's your exit strategy? Because ultimately you will exit the business, whichever form or format that's going to be. And it's essential that you build a valuable business.
Absolutely. So this stuff seems pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. And, anybody listening in would kind of say, okay, well, cool, that makes sense. But why is it so hard for entrepreneurs and business owners to seek the kind of help that they need?
Look, the 2 things that we always hear is, it's too expensive, and it's really not. And the second thing is, I don't have time. And the second one is actually the reason why you should do that. If you don't have time, it means that something is not working properly. As an owner, you should not be working all the time, or be doing the things that you be doing. But I would say the real reason, if I really had to dig to the bottom of this.
So you're saying that those 2 reasons are just, it's the symptom, not the underlying cause. So let's get to what's the real reason.
The real reason is ego and fear. We're all so proud about, who we are, what we can do. I said just now how mature we can be. But, what will people say, and what will they think if I get somebody else to give me advice or help me in my business? And The best way for me to look at it is, that if I take a piece of paper and I put a pen and I put a little dot on there, that's my knowledge. That's what I know. The paper is the knowledge that's out there in the world. So by putting more dots on that page and connecting you with more dots, just broadens your space in terms of where you can tap into, just so significantly. And in fact, it also becomes valuable to you when you can share your experiences with others, and you can see the impact that you have on them, and that builds confidence in your own abilities again. So it's a very funny way of helping you become more confident in terms of doing what you need to do.
I love that. And to wrap up, I guess, the formal section of the discussion, if anybody who's listening in here and you're a business owner, you're running let's put it in dollars, you're running a $2 million to a $20 million business, or even a bigger business, right? You feel stuck. What, if you could give, 3, 4, 5 pieces of advice, okay? No more than that, because then it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah,
what should these business owners do tomorrow or today, for that matter?
Just if you go back to the rugby analogy, the things have changed. The guys wear jerseys that's fit tight these days. Watch the TV from the field, and so many things have changed. But ultimately, you still need to score a try, you still need to tackle, you still need to pass a ball. So basics is what's important, and in business, it's the same. And if you understand the basics and you have focus, that's where the two meet each other. But for me, having a clearly defined competitive advantage, understanding what it is that makes you different, and then building your sales, marketing, communication strategy around that to make sure that you get that across. Our biggest learning for me in the last 6 years have been that culture really eats strategy for breakfast. If you don't have well-defined values and living it, it's difficult to run a successful business. One more, maybe 2 more things. Find 3 things that's really important, and spend 60% of your time on that. The rest,
or 80% even.
even. The rest is feeding the animals. You leave the to-do list; it will take care of itself. And then finally, you need to learn to delegate, but I always say don't abdicate.
You've got one more we spoke about before, and I've got a variant on that. It's something I struggled with because I'm a natural people pleaser. I want to engage. So that's a bit of a clue. so learning to say.
Learning to say no. So we actually tell people, can you formulate a to-don't list instead of a to-do list?
I love that, because you've got to deal with the overwhelm. You can always be busy, but focus and effectiveness is learning about when to say no ultimately. So I love that. I mean, you should IP protect it, the to-don't list. Eduan, I mean, the discussion's been fascinating. There's so many just nuggets of wisdom in it. Before we wrap up, we're going to do what we call a rapid fire section. It's just a few quick questions, 10, 20-second answer, top of mind. And I've got 5 questions we're going to ask you. So first one, what is the biggest mistake founders make?
They don't build businesses. They create a very stressful job for themselves.
Wonderful. And that's the reason I actually started bizval, because that happened to my dad. He got laid off in his 40s, and he basically became a solopreneur. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. But at 75, he's still climbing on ladders. He's self-employed. He never built a business. So, and that's real. If you had to choose cash flow or profit?
Trick question. Cash is king. I think you said it as well. But if it's profitable, it will catch up with you. So profit.
Cool. But not manipulated profit. So
No,
it's
no,
cash profit. It's probably both.
Cash profit, yeah, absolutely. But if you don't have profit, you will never have the cash.
Exactly. Yeah. Then what's the best leadership trait? What's the most important or the best leadership trait that, if you could give one piece of advice?
Best learning for me, again, in the last 6 years is treat others the way they want to be treated. We tend to treat people the way you want to be treated, but you need to treat them the way they want to be treated.
Fantastic. What reduces business value the fastest?
We spoke about it. Owner dependency.
Yeah, and it's funny because that almost comes back to the previous question. If you're egocentric, and it's all about you, it's very hard to let go, right? So these two aren't disconnected, but it's the thing that got you there often is not the thing that's going to get you to where you need to be. And I think I just want to draw a distinction here. Sometimes in the early stage of a business, it's important that the business owners involved understand it, but there comes a juncture, I guess, where you need to say, okay, cool. If I want to build something of enduring value, I need to step back. And often some business owners struggle with that because they can't make that shift from being the business to stepping out, right? And that's where you help with that transition a lot of the time.
A lot.
Last question, and I didn't even ask you if you read, but what's your best book?
Gee whiz. I'm a compulsive reader, so that's I would say all time probably Good to Great. I really enjoyed that, but last year Atomic Habits, really impactful book.
Fantastic. And one last question: if you could start your career again, what's one thing that you would do differently, if anything at all?
I have to support my business that I'm in now, and that is ask for advice earlier. Surround yourself with other people and get inputs from other people. Don't just go on your own.
Fantastic, Eduan. I mean, it's been a fascinating chat. And before I wrap up, I'm just going to give you the opportunity to say one final thought to anyone listening in. One word of encouragement or whatever. What would that be?
First of all, thanks for having me. It was absolutely lovely. Obviously, we can talk a lot more about a lot of things, but I will just reiterate that you don't need to build it alone. Structured accountability and access to other people just helps you with the growth, and it reduces risk.
Fantastic. Well, Eduan, I mean, there's just so much in here. I mean, I think just from this podcast alone, I mean, we could probably write a textbook, but I just love the way you've made it so accessible and so understandable to our listeners. So, if anybody wants to connect with Eduan, you can find him on LinkedIn under Eduan Steynberg, Eduan, and Steynberg, Steynberg. Or you can learn more about the Alternative Board Western Cape. So it's thealternativeboard.za.com. You'll find all the different franchises, but you'll also find the Western Cape one there, which Eduan runs. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a fellow founder, a friend, or somebody you feel needs to hear this. And until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks a lot.